I'm not covering the topic I almost always cover, which is mob programming. I'm covering a topic that is sort of what led up to having an environment where we could experiment with doing something like mob programming. So this is what I call make it easy. It couples up with the idea that I use that it's called turn up the good. I have about 5 or 6 of these kinds of things that help me think about the way I want my work environment to be and how I can have an influence on it. So that's what this is about. So let's see what we can do. I'm going to take it pretty quickly because there's a lot I want to cover. And this is just a little bit of the bigger idea of make it easy, but I'm going to give you the fundamental part of it. So I always start almost every talk with this quote from Peter Block, which I'll read directly. The value of another's experience is to give us hope, not to tell us how or whether to proceed. I've used that in my own life many times now. You can see I've got a bunch of books on my bookshelf. I read a lot of books. I go to a lot of talks. I look at a lot of nowadays YouTube videos, whatever, to learn things, but I experiment with them and I try them. I'm not looking for someone to tell me what to do. I'm looking for someone to spark some ideas. So this is how I use this idea. I'm asking you to keep an open mind because some of the things I'm going to share with you probably will be outside of the realm of how you normally go about doing things. So just leave disbelief behind. Don't just allow this stuff to influence you a little bit. And then maybe later in the question and answer period, we can talk about some things that were puzzling or didn't make sense to you or whatever. So I want to share the story of my very first job. I was 13 years old, I believe. I hadn't yet gotten into high school, and I was looking for a summer job, and I got this job watering plants in a nursery near my home. We lived out in the countryside. And the boss, the person who hired me, told me on the very first day that I have 2 responsibilities. The main one is to water the plants. Give them not just a chance to keep alive, but give them a chance to thrive. So this was important. He made it very clear. He told me first, he said, you got to make sure you water every plant when you're watering because they can't get up and walk over to the water faucet to get a drink when they feel thirsty. You are the one who are keeping them alive. And so that was telling me I have this important job. But he also said every plant has a different need. Every plant, every species, or every type of plant has its own water needs. Some of them need a lot of water, some only a little bit. Some need to be watered every day, some need to be watered once a week. But you have to know a lot about the plants, so you'll learn that as you go. So he was telling me I'm going to have a lot of learning to do before I can get good at my job. But he was expecting me to get good at my job. But he told me I had a second responsibility. And the second responsibility was to pay attention during my days. I worked there every day throughout the summer, and I continued working there for 5 or 6 years. Pay attention. And each week when I come in to get my pay, I want to share with him something I found that we could improve. Look for ways to improve things, to do things better. And then we'll take action on it. So just as an example, the first week I noticed that the hoses were leaky. They were, water was being wasted. And so the thing that I saw we could do to improve things was to keep the hoses from leaking. And then we could patch the hoses, And so that's what I did. So this was the 2 responsibilities, but this one here is the important one. This is a concept that I think this man understood. Mr. Smith was his name, Lawrence Smith. Tiny improvements over time provide a compounding effect. So if you make a little improvement every day or every week, whatever your compounding period is, you're going to gain more and more improvement over time. Wherever you started with, over 365 compounding periods. So if I can make a 1% improvement every day, now that might be very difficult to do, I understand that. But if we could do that improvement every day over a year's time, we would have a 37.78%, 37.78% times improvement. Not percent, 37.78 times improvement. That's a huge amount of improvement. If you could do that well in your financial investments, in a few years, you would be one of the wealthiest people in the world. That's practically unheard of, right? So this I took to Excel to prove it for myself, and I found those numbers were correct. So if you're working with a weekly compounding, it's going to take quite a while. But if you work with a daily compounding, you get this effect very quickly within a year. So is this true? Well, it kind of is. If we get those little improvements, so I think all this means is let's have this habit of these tiny improvements. The problem is normally we, it's kind of strange. We don't get this. We want this, but we can't get it. And this is what this talk is about. So this is a good thing to do. And that gentleman had gotten this habit, and he wanted his employees, he wanted to take advantage of every brain that he had in his little company. There's probably 10 of us there. It's difficult to achieve this, and that's what we're going to explore. What are the things that make it hard for us to get these tiny improvements? So this makes things hard to manage. I think management is a very difficult job. I think it's misunderstood. That we even think we need it is something I'll probably put a talk about that. I'm not sure that we need to manage at least the way that we've been doing it. We have so much effort in managing things. So let's talk about it. So I usually do this as an exercise. Today we don't really have enough time for an exercise. So I usually ask this question: what makes things difficult? And I ask everybody to contribute. So to do this really quickly, think about something that makes it hard for you to effectively get your work done, and put it into the chat. Quick as you can, just put it into the chat. Just type it on in. There we go. Excellent. Keep putting them in. I love it. I love this. This is fantastic. Okay, I'm going to start reading off these because I want to get this talk going. But normally I do this as a 3 or 4 minute exercise, and people come up with quite a few things. Look at this: meetings, thinking too much. I think that might be true. Changing requirements. Oh, yes. Governance and policies. Too many meetings. Communicating ideas. Planning commitments. Waiting. Lack of knowledge. Priority shifts. On and on. Oh, these are wonderful. And I'll save these notes off. I'll add some of these to my list. Let's go and look at how others have answered this. I did this as a 3-minute exercise at a company before a workshop. I asked them, what makes it hard to work here? What makes it hard to get your work done? They came up with 50 things in about 3 or 4 minutes, and I put them into a list. You've gotten these same things. Look in the very middle here near needless meetings. Meetings is the most common thing I'll see. But let me go down some of these things. Insufficient resources or missing resources. Cumbersome processes. Disagreements. I love these two. Too much noise. Too quiet. So those are two very different points of view. Onboarding. Workflow interruptions. There's a lot. Context switching. Workflow interruptions. Distractions. I think multitasking probably is in here somewhere. Maybe not. Unclear expectations or unclear requirements. Indecision, distractions. I don't think anybody put analysis paralysis in here. Oh yeah, there it is. Bugs, snow days. Now I don't know if you ever get snow days, but this was in Boston. And in Boston, when it snows heavy, it snows a lot, and their public transit doesn't even run for a while. Okay, so you get the idea. These are just some of the things that happen. So what have I learned from doing this? I've done this exercise probably 1,000 times, starting in some form back in around 1999. So I've done this many, many, many times. So what have I learned is that there are many problems. I have a list of at least 200 unique or slightly different problems, so you get, kind of unique, that they are persistent. If I go back to a company I visited 10, 15 years ago, they will still have the same problems. They'll come up with this same list. And they are everywhere. If I go to company to company to company, they have many problems and they're persistent. So this is an interesting thing. This is what I've learned, but I want to consider these things. Why are there so many? Why are they so persistent? Why have they been so pervasive? Why are they everywhere? So let's look at that. Back in 1999, I had this experience where we were doing retrospectives. They didn't call it that back then. It wasn't Agile, but they were doing iterations. They would do them every 6 weeks, and they would look for the problems. What went wrong and how can we fix it? So first we identify what was wrong. Then we came up with some plan to fix those things that were wrong. Don't worry about the specific things here. Then we went about actually trying to get some training or whatever to get rid of these problems that we were having, and we'd go back into the next iteration. So in the next iteration, we do our work. At the retrospective, we found we had the same problems. We determined to fix them sort of in the same way and get some more training or do some more practice or think about it or whatever. And we ended up doing it again. The third iteration, this is like 3 months later or 4.5 months later. Same thing over and over and over again. This is a cycle, and identified, of course, in those days, everybody in software development was looking for patterns that they could identify. And I saw this pattern, and I called it the cycle of continuous no improvements. I saw this at company after company after company. So after that first contract I was on where I noticed this, I took notes and paid attention everywhere I worked. Usually I would go into a place for a 3-month contract or a 6-month contract or whatever for 3 or 4 years or 2 or 3 years. I saw it everywhere, this same pattern. Well, why is this happening? And this was the beginnings of it, was for me to realize that most of these problems were actually symptoms. I suspect all of these things are symptoms and not themselves a problem. In other words, they are the result of some problem that we're having. And if we work on the symptom, we can't really get a solution. We can't solve symptoms. It's like if you have a headache and you're congested and you have a cough, and you go to the doctor and say, you have a cold, you just need to rest for a week and drink plenty of fluids and get some sleep. But you want to go to work, you want to get things done, so you take a aspirin and you take a decongestant, you take a cough suppressant. Well, you're not dealing with the being sick, you're dealing with the symptoms of being sick. And so you go to work anywhere, spreading your disease around. At the end of the day, you feel terrible, and your body is not repairing itself because you've been active all day. Working on the symptoms, solving for the symptoms, doesn't solve the problem. And this is what I was seeing, I think. So I think at best, when we try to solve a symptom, we are just hiding the problem, which makes it just worse. We're no longer paying attention that we have a headache. And so we're too active during the day, not getting the rest, and so on. So when we're hiding the problem, we are not aware of it. We're not dealing with it because we're not paying attention to it anymore. So this is the thing. I think there's a bigger conundrum. I'd like to consider this. Can we actually solve problems? We are paid, most of us in software development, we're here to solve problems for people. And so in a way that we can do. So I think it depends on the domain we're in. And I'll talk about domains later. The idea of Cynefin domains, you're probably aware of that, the Cynefin. Anyways, it doesn't, I'm not saying that we can't solve all problems. Like if I've got the cold, if I just lay in bed and get the rest I need, I will eventually get over it. But a lot of problems can't be solved. What I've seen happening is that we often, that today's solution to a problem just becomes tomorrow's problem, the next day's problem. So the solution that we thought was solving the problem actually just introduces another aspect of what we were trying to solve, or it just turns into something we now need to deal with. The main reason for that has to do with how systems work, and we'll cover that later. So things are hard to manage because we focus on solving problems. Maybe there's something better that we should be doing. I'm going to emphasize this and talk about the misplaced focus of management. Management is often focused on solving problems. They have personnel problems, they have scheduling problems, they have finance problems. Everything's problems, and they're always trying to solve it. So they get a problem-solving mindset. From that moment on, everything looks like a problem, and we got to solve it. So here's the thing. There is one big problem of management that almost every manager sees, and that is it's hard to manage things. So what do? We try to solve for that. And this is a problem itself. I love this concept. Oops, I'm going to click on something here. This is what we normally say. We need to make it easier to manage things. What I believe happens is the reverse. When we try to make it easy to manage things, we make it hard for people to get their work done. I'll use this quote from Peter Drucker. So much of what we call management consists in making it difficult for people to work. That is not going to make things easier to manage. So we're really dealing with a symptom instead of the problem when we try to make it easy to manage things. This is difficult. So remember, the whole theme of this is let's make it easy. So we're going to come to where do we need to apply this thinking in a little bit. So why do we let this happen? And this is what I'm going to cover now. So first of all, I'm going to start with beliefs and biases. They go hand in hand. We have beliefs. Beliefs are what we believe about the world around us and the way people are and the way things are. I got this little chart I'm going to show you from this book from Dave Gray, a very deep thinker on these things. I really like to read his books and listen to him talk. He talks about reality. Reality is everything that's out there. Reality is everything that could be known, but nobody can know it all. So we don't know. As a matter of fact, humans know very little bit about reality. But within our own experiences, we get exposed to some small part of reality. As we move forward from this, we can only pay attention to a very small amount of stuff. So we have our experiences, but we don't remember everything that happened. We don't internalize everything that happened. It's going to be a very small amount of stuff that we pay attention to. And upon this, we can build some theories upon which we can make judgments and we can base our beliefs. And when we get to the top of this thing, this is our beliefs. It's the things we think are obvious. But everybody has a different experience set. So what's obvious to you and obvious to me isn't obvious to the next person. So this is something that tricks ourselves. We've based our beliefs on these theories and judgments that came from focusing on the very little bit of stuff that we're paying attention to. That's troubling because we believe very firmly in stuff we have no reason to really believe in. It's a trick that we play on ourselves. It's the human comedy. Okay, so things are hard to manage because what we believe is based on that thin thread. So this is the thing. We need to have beliefs. Beliefs are necessary, or else we couldn't get through the day without wasting most of our time thinking too deeply about stuff. We would use up all of our energy because our brain uses up a lot of energy. It would use up all of our energy and we would end up dying because we weren't even getting food. So beliefs are necessary, but it's also a limit for us. So I'm going to give an example of a limiting belief in just a minute. But let's talk about biases. So there's tons and tons of biases. It's been a focus of people for now 10 or 15 years around software development and any kind of thought work, any kind of knowledge work. And we go way back. They started studying these things in the 50s and 60s. There's lots of biases that we can look at. I'm going to just say, learn about them and pay a little bit of attention to them. That can be useful for us. Or I should at least say for myself, I've been studying them quite a bit. I'm only going to talk about one. Confirmation bias is where we want to confirm the things that we already believe. We want to confirm the things that we wish were true. This is what confirmation bias does for us. Some of the problems we get from this, though, is that we will have a biased search for the information that we want to inform us. We're not looking at the things that are counter to what we want to believe. We're looking for the things that are in alignment with what we want to believe. And we will interpret those things in a biased manner. If you take the same data and give it to two different people who have opposite beliefs, they will use that data to support their own belief. They'll tell why that data is supporting them. And we will have a biased memory about the things that have gone on. And we want to support our belief, and we will have this selective memory about what works and what doesn't work and things like that. So things are hard to manage because it's human nature to believe what we already believe or what we want to believe. This is a problem. We need to be always with an open mind if we're going to get the knowledge we need to get. So here's an example of a belief that limits us. We believe we've succeeded because we did things right, that we knew what to do, we analyzed things right, we used the data right. We believe that we are the reason for our success. Now, hopefully you've seen this book. If you haven't, it's worth reading. It's a hard read, but I've read it a couple times. I got it both in hard form, 3 ways: hard form, electronic form, digital form, and audible or read to me. So I could study this quite a bit. They've got a lot of good stuff in here. I don't believe all of it, right? But the studies are pretty useful. So this is what they say. Kahneman says success is talent plus luck. So the talent portion of it is we have to know what we're doing to some degree. And the luck portion is this thing's lined up for us. Great success is a little bit more talent and a lot more luck. Now, if that's true, we should not take pride in the things that succeeded for us. So mob programming, I'm famous for mob programming, but it was just, I was at the right place at the right time with this kind of thinking of make it easy, where we were able to introduce this way that we could work. And so we kind of stumbled upon it. That doesn't matter. If I were to go from company to company now and tell them how to make their place better, I really have to say, have a lot of good luck, right? That's what I can't tell you how to fix anything, but have a lot of good luck. Well, how do we get that? I have a whole talk on that. I think we can improve our chance for luck a little bit, try to line things up. But things are hard to manage because success is more about the randomness than anything else. When we succeed, we want to believe it is our own actions that cause this success. And that feeds our confirmation bias. That feeds other biases. This isn't really necessarily very good. I want to talk about systems and domains now and how this ties into this. So a quick definition of a system is just an interconnected, interacting set of elements that achieve something. It may not be what they were planned to achieve, or the system may have just evolved from the ecosystem or the planetary system. There's no purpose to the planetary system. It's just the way things ended up. Or at least depends on what you believe, right? Okay. So the reason I want to talk about systems, I want to talk about the level of systems. So you have the work itself, like making a sandwich. You have the system of work. That's the steps you follow to make the sandwich. Then you have the system of management, how you manage the making of the sandwich, the techniques and so on, and changing those techniques, and how you're going to schedule things, and how you're going to plan for things, and the decision making. That's outside of the system of the work itself, which is outside of the work itself. And then outside of this is our purpose. Why are we making the sandwiches? And that sort of thing. So I believe there are systems within systems. And one thing that we should pay attention to is wherever we find a symptom of a problem, that's not necessarily where we can solve for or analyze and deal with that symptom and find the real problem and solve it. So it might be out here or out here or out here or in even a bigger surrounding system. What we're looking at usually is symptoms. So as we move out this thing, we have to really ask ourselves, is this still a symptom of something else? Usually I find that we can't just solve for these things anyways. We don't want to spend too much time doing this, but just being aware of it. So things are hard to manage because we rarely consider at what level the problem is located. And we don't understand that we can't solve it at that spot. So when we see a symptom, we go to where the symptom is and we try to solve it there. Instead of stopping and considering, where is this a symptom? Is this a problem? And where might we be able to deal with the problem? So let's go on from here. A lot of people get blamed for stuff in their work, just an example, when it's not their fault. They're just kind of following the work system that they've been given. And really, the blame is not on that person. The blame is on the people working in one of those systems that's outside of where the work's being done. So anyways, this is another aspect of it. Things aren't as isolated as they seem. So I draw a chart like this. We see our nice clean circles of these systems that I just mentioned. But there are all kinds of other systems going on around us, like the transportation, how people get to work, what's the government system like, what's the weather like around us, what if somebody gets some disease in some country far away and suddenly it spreads all over the world? These are outside our system of work. It's outside of the systems of where our company exists, but we are involved in those, and that's interfering all the time. So we see a problem, we think it's local to us, and yet it's being affected and pressure's being put on from other areas that are causing these problems. So a little bit more about the nature of systems. I want to cover this. I love this book from John Gall, The Systems Bible, and he has a bunch of laws that he shares. A working complex system invariably evolved from a working simple system. This is a mouthful. This tells us a lot of things. It tells us we can't invent our own systems and then make them work, because invariably evolved means we have to have a small working simple system to be able to evolve a working complex system. So we set out to do these transformations in companies and do adoptions and all this stuff in agile adoptions and things like that. We're not going to be able to achieve this because of this law, if this is true. Remember, keep an open mind. Here's a great one from Denell Meadows. An important function of almost every system is to ensure its own perpetuation. Once a system's in place, it wants to survive. So whatever we try to do to change that system, it's going to evolve around it to keep itself alive. Now, it's going to affect it. It's going to change it. This is the problem. Also from Denell Meadows. If we try to change a working complex system, the change will be at best temporary into the result we want. We don't know what the result will actually be. And the side effects are going to be unknown until we actually do the thing. So we think we can affect a useful change, and this is why things are hard to manage, because the system is good at perpetuating itself. Interestingly, it does that only by evolving. It's always changing around us. We can't predict where it's going to go. We can't change it by intervention or transformations or adoptions and all these things. It won't change the way we like. But I want to talk about Cynefin and the domains real quickly. You see this chart. You've all heard about Cynefin before, probably. But this is the way I like to think about it. In the U.S., we have these biscuits. Let's say we want some biscuits, some pastry. You can buy this thing. You open it up. You put the little biscuits on a pan. You put it in the oven at just the right temperature. And you're going to get the same result every time, unless you're not paying attention and you leave it in the oven too long, it'll catch on fire maybe. But this is the basic idea of the clear world. Whatever follow the instructions, it works every time. When we step into the complicated space, we have a lot of knowns, but we have some unknowns. And we know what the unknowns are, but we don't just follow a recipe. So if we want really good pastry, we need a baker who really understands, or a chef, the qualities of food and how the food comes together and exactly the proportions. And the proportions are about a feel, the temperature in the room, the temperature in the oven, the quality of our oven. All these little details, they understand that. And so they adjust for it. Then we come into the world of complex. This is called molecular gastronomy, where we're going to invent new food combinations and new ways of preparing food. There's lots of unknowns. There is no recipe to follow. And when we get the result we want, we know it, but we won't know it until we achieve it. We're going to go, hey, that's good. It may not be what we were after, but it's good. So this is the complex world, which I think is where software development is. And then the chaotic area is like, hey, the biscuits are burning. What are you going to do about it? You're just going to put out the fire and then decide what are we going to do. So those are the domains. Here's the thing about the domains. The tactics we can use are going to vary from domain to domain. And things are hard to manage because we often don't understand the domain of the problem we're trying to solve. And we're really just looking at the symptoms sometimes. So we use techniques that aren't suitable for the issue we have at hand. And this comes from the ignorance of not even understanding these domains and what we might be able to do there. So I covered a lot of stuff. Okay, I want to give you a couple practical things. I think this is going to take me a little bit past my planned time, about another 5 minutes. Hopefully that's okay. I want to cover a few practical things. So working smarter versus working harder. The make it easy idea, which I have adopted probably for the last 20, probably a lot longer ago than that, but focused on and started really applying in software development in the last 15, 20 years. And the idea of the bubble. And I'll explain what all these are as we go pretty quickly. So working harder working smarter versus working harder. There's a paper from a couple professors at MIT. I think it's about 20 years old now. It really made a good, clear case for, you remember the original story about me working at the nursery, of looking for things we can improve. Oh, this is telling me I should have been done by now. I'm so sorry, but we'll get there pretty quick. This paper you can get for free on the internet, search for it. Nobody ever gets credit for fixing problems that never happened. This is the problem with having this focus on problem solving. We're usually trying to solve problems at the wrong level, and we're probably trying to solve symptoms instead of problems. This is a really good paper. I'll let you read it for yourselves. But the basic idea is this: the amount of effort you put in times the amount, whatever capability you have, will give you your actual performance. So if you're highly capable, you only need to put in a small amount of effort to get the same results if you were not highly capable. So the basic idea is just this: if you're needing to get a lot done, then you work harder and you get it done, and that reduces the amount of time you can spend on making things easier, improving your capability. So if you do the reverse, if you spend a lot of time spent improving capability, you will need to work a great deal less to get the same actual performance. And in these charts, they kind of show that at first, if you work harder, you get a little bit of benefit. So that becomes your go-to way to work. We always will just work a little bit harder. And then when you try to improve performance by improving your actual capabilities, you will end up having a dip in results for a while. And you'll think, oh, wait, that's not getting things done. Let's go back and let's just work harder. Often I hear people say, I don't have time to train a new employee because then I got to get this stuff done. If I'm training a new employee, onboarding somebody, I'm not getting my work done. So this is what we often see. So this is the fundamental concept behind what they're talking about. Let's spend more time increasing our capability than doing the work we're trying to do. That means that we're moving out a level. We're moving out one of those levels in the circles I drew. This just goes back to Mr. Smith's original idea that I learned when I was 13 and should have applied a lot more throughout my whole life. So you guys who are now, pretty young, maybe you're 13, focus on understanding what's going good around you and try to internalize it sooner rather than later, like some of us old guys. So let's have this tiny improvement habit. Now I want to talk about the make it easy. I think this is a habit that we can have. The misplaced focus of management, remember, was about let's make it easy to manage things. They're focused on the wrong thing to make it easy. So they have to understand that something about the domain they're in and really and the nature of systems. If we make it easier for people to do the work, then it will become easier to manage. If we focus on making it easy to manage, it will become harder to get the work done. I hope you see the connections happening here. So let's just make it as easy as possible for everybody to do the work. This is all I'm asking for. I think this is an easy thing to do. So systems and domains. We've covered this. And now, if you remember, what we said was systems resist change. So what can we do about this? Is it hopeless? I don't think it's hopeless. I'm going to share this idea of the bubble. I created a bubble at Hunter Industries where we came up with the process that we now call mob programming. But I didn't know this idea of the bubble. It's just what I wanted to do was create an area where the team could work without interference from the rest of the company, without all the pressures of this is the way you should do things. I wanted the team to figure out for themselves, how are we going to do things? So Michael Sahota made this chart in 2013. I don't know how long he'd been talking about it, but this is the way I think about it. At Hunter and at other places I've worked since then, this is what I try to do. Let's get this team isolated so that they can figure out how they can best work. If we can do that, we need some kind of adapter for the rest of the organization, so the rest of the organization or the rest of the system doesn't even know this is happening. Now, I'm not guaranteeing this would work, but this was my goal. If we could get that to work for the one team, it could grow, and then more of that same department would have these same abilities to make things easier, and it could grow to envelop the whole department eventually. At the same time, we're reaching out to other places in the company, and other people are starting to see a little bit of this, and they're the ones who are compatible with the concepts. And it doesn't matter where they are already in the organization. And my idea was those would grow over time, and they would grow to such a degree that it would overwhelm the existing system. So this is the approach that I would want to experiment with. And this is what I've tried at many companies. I don't know how to do this in any scientific way. I don't think any one person will live long enough to do enough of these experiments. But that's just a theory. This is like the culture bubble, I think, is a way to see some of these changes happen and to have them grow within a company. So we've kind of covered everything. The idea of the culture bubble is, can we introduce the chance for these small systems to start and then give them the ability to evolve? Not everyone will be useful to us. But as we remember from John Gall, invariably, the working complex system we have evolved from some working simple system. And not all simple systems are actually working. A lot of them fade away and die off, become extinct. That's the end of the talk. I like to share with this saying I learned when I was in my 20s, back in the 70s, I believe. The object isn't to make art, it's to be in that wonderful state which makes art inevitable. So we create that environment where great things can happen, and I expect great things will happen. We just can't predict what they're going to be. So that's it. That's the Make It Easy talk.